I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics, messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for July the 22nd, 2025. Today, we do have an important subject to review from Romans 2, 28 and 29, and whether or not non-Jewish believers in Israel's Messiah may be regarded as spiritual Jews. Of course, as we know right now in our day of growing supersessionism or replacement theology, particularly from those who are advocating that God is finished with the ethnic descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that non-Jewish believers, Gentiles who express faith in Yeshua, Jesus, they are the true Jews. The Christian church is the new Israel, and all of the physical promises given to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they are metaphors of the bounty we have in Christ. That's something you're going to start seeing a lot of on social media. Christians are the true Jews, and frequently Romans 2, 28 and 29 is invoked to support this. Now, if you do not already, please do go to outreachisraelbookstore.com and get a copy of our resource, Are Non-Jewish Believers Really a Part of Israel? Now, this is a resource we originally released in 2013. It got updated last year, 2024, and it mainly comes from the exact opposite standpoint, dealing with those who want to conclude that non-Jewish believers are part of some separate church entity, independent and entirely distinct from Israel proper or the Jewish people. And of course, throughout today's Messianic community, there's the widespread conviction that non-Jewish believers are part of the Commonwealth of Israel. They are wild branches grafted into the olive tree. They may be regarded as fellow citizens with the saints. They are part of an enlarged kingdom realm per James the Just words in Acts 15, 15 through 18, speaking of the tabernacle of David, restored 12 tribes of Israel at the center, enlarged borders to welcome in the righteous from the nations. Non-Jewish believers do not replace or displace Israel proper, but rather are to co-labor with them and serve alongside them in the salvation of Israel. And particularly in today's Messianic community, that would mean co-participation in the Messianic mission, Jewish outreach, Jewish evangelism, Israel solidarity. And yes, at this phase of development, if you're not Jewish, you have to be specially called into the Messianic movement. So this is a publication which argues, yes, they're part of the Commonwealth of Israel, but not to replace or displace Messianic Jewish believers. Still, in that evaluation, you have to deal with things like Romans 2, 28 and 29. Are non-Jewish believers in Israel's Messiah to be regarded as spiritual Jews, so to speak? And there are a number of perspectives we have to weigh into that. Now, before I get into this teaching, and it's, by the way, taken from that publication, I do have an open file on what are we going to do about replacement theology, supersessionism. That continues to have notes added to it. That's not on any particular timetable, but it is something that I know as things get more and more complicated, I'll have to address. 10 to 15 years ago, the subject was, well, are non-Jewish believers part of some separate independent church, entirely distinct, maybe even divorced from Israel or not. But even in that conversation, we have to deal with, well, what do you do about Romans 2:28 and 29? So this is hopefully going to answer a lot of questions some of you may have had. All right, so got to switch windows really quickly. Yes. All right, Romans 2:28 and 29. For he is not a Jew who is one outwardly, nor is circumcision that which is outward in the flesh. But he is a Jew who is one inwardly, and circumcision is that which is of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the letter, and his praise is not from men, but from God. Romans 2:28 and 29, New American Standard Update. Romans 2:28 and 29 is a place where it is commonly asserted that non-Jewish believers can possibly be viewed as some sort of spiritual Jews, even though not born Jewish in the flesh, or perhaps even physically circumcised. Such people may be perceived as having a Jewish heart via their faith in the Jewish Messiah. It is difficult to avoid how there is obviously a connection made in the text where the Greek Iudaios serves to represent the Hebrew Yehuda, which on the basis of Genesis 29:35 and 49:8 is widely regarded to mean to give thanks, laud, praise, theological word book of the Old Testament. The true Jew is one who can have praises issued from the God of Israel, the Creator, and not other mortals. For one is not a Jew who is one outwardly, nor is circumcision something visible in the flesh. Rather, the Jew is one inwardly, and circumcision is of the heart, in spirit, not in letter. His praise is not from men, but from God. Romans 2:28 and 29, Tree of Life version. Interpreters, whether lay readers or even some professional expositors, tend to be divided as to whether or not the person who is Iudaios in view in Romans 2:28 and 29 is simply among the many Jewish people who constituted the community of Messiah followers in Rome, or how any person, regardless of ethnicity, who trusts in the Jewish Messiah may be regarded as quote-unquote Jewish, likely via some sort of connection to him. Not surprisingly, both views of Romans 2:28 and 29 can be detectable within our contemporary Messianic movement. In his Jewish New Testament commentary, David H. Stern actually devoted several pages to Romans 2:28 and 29, which in the Complete Jewish Bible is rendered as, for the real Jew is not merely Jewish outwardly. True circumcision is not only external and physical. On the contrary, the real Jew is one inwardly, and true circumcision is of the heart, spiritual, not literal, so that his praise comes not from other people, but from God. Romans 2:28 and 29, Complete Jewish Bible. In reviewing some of Stern's remarks, it is not quite clear where he stands on the audience being addressed in these verses. He first makes the attestation that these statements by Paul should be read with people who were actually Jewish in mind, but then wavers a bit. So this is from his Jewish New Testament commentary. Quote, "It is obvious that in verse 28, the people spoken of as not real Jews are in fact born Jews, for no one needs to be told that Gentiles are not Jews. But in this passage, exactly who is a real Jew? Is Shaul talking about born Jews who are also born again, John 3:3? That is about Messianic Jews. Or is he making a radical and dramatic assertion that some Gentiles, as well as some born Jews, are actually Jews in God's sight by virtue of being Jews inwardly, having circumcised hearts that offer praise to God? In other words, is he saying that both Messianic Jews and Gentile Christians are Jews? Unquote. As he deliberates on the various options presented to the interpreter, Stern bears a reliance on the medieval Jewish Pardes hermeneutic, thinking that while literally it is impossible for non-Jewish believers in Israel's Messiah to be regarded as quote-unquote Jewish, spiritually it is something possibly to consider. Continuing from his Jewish New Testament commentary, quote, carrying many new ideas in his head, Shaul could produce a sentence that had both a simple sense, pashat, and a hint, remez, of something more profound. Furthermore, he would not be averse to making an allegorical or homiletical application, drash, of his own words, or looking in them for a secret meaning, sod, because these four ways of interpreting texts were well known among educated Jews. Thus, a born-again Gentile, one who has come to faith in the God of Israel through trusting Yeshua the Messiah, is indeed a Jew inwardly. His heart is circumcised, even though his flesh is not. He is a true God-praiser, whose praise comes from God and not from other people, in many senses a real Jew. Unquote. Stern takes some liberties, such as assuming that the Pardes hermeneutic was even in usage in the 1st century CE, when by all accounts, while Midrash was, Pardes was not. Furthermore, this part of the epistle to the Romans is plainly, by the text of the letter itself, mainly directed to a sub-audience. If you bear the name Jew and rely upon the law and boast in God, Romans 2:17, New American Standard. The Apostle Paul communicated to a broad and mixed Jewish and non-Jewish audience in Rome, and there should be no doubt that certain parts of his message concern more Jewish concerns, while other parts concern more localized Roman issues. Reading Romans as an ancient letter, with parts of Romans more concerned with specific subgroups, groups or subgroups among its original recipients, is not often taken into consideration to the degree which it should be. While there are those who think that non-Jewish believers in Yeshua, being some sort of spiritual Jews, was in view for Romans 2:28 and 29, there are others, recognizing the mixed audience of Jewish, Greek, and Roman Messiah followers among the assemblies in Rome, who think that the Jewish believers in Rome were specifically being addressed here. This is a subgroup in Paul's letter, which Paul specifically admonished as he emphasized that personal Jewishness, including the distinction of being physically circumcised from the time of birth, is not enough for them to be regarded highly by God. This is especially true when the tenor of Romans 2:14 through 16 is considered, and how various people from the nations, and some think even pagans who have sought God only via his natural revelation in creation at large, Romans 1:19 and 20, are shown to be more obedient to his instruction than various Jewish people might be at times. For when Gentiles who do not have the law do instinctively the things of the law, these, not having the law, are a law to themselves, and that they show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience bearing witness, and their thoughts alternately accusing or else defending them, on the day when, according to my gospel, God will judge the secrets of men through Messiah Yeshua. Romans 2:14 through 16, New American Standard. Jewish people must possess a stellar personal character, one which is embodied by the proper name Yehuda, Iudaios, and receive accolades, not from any of their fellow human beings because they are Jewish and circumcised, but from God himself. Mark D. Nanos's statements in the Jewish Annotated New Testament approach Romans 2:28 and 29, not from the perspective of a non-Jewish Greek or Roman Messiah follower actually being a spiritual Jew, but instead how Paul's words were directed to admonish the Jewish Messiah followers in Rome. He first comments on Romans 2:28. For a person is not a Jew who is one outwardly, nor is true circumcision something external and physical. New Revised Standard. Quote, Paul refers to the ideals to which circumcised flesh for Jewish males bears witness. For a person is not a Jew who is one outwardly, literally, for the Jew is not ultimately the one conspicuously known to be a Jew, nor is true, Greek lacks true, circumcision something external and physical. Literally, nor is the one known to be circumcised in the flesh, thereby necessarily the ideal Jew, unquote. Nanos goes on in commenting on Romans 2:29. Rather, a person is a Jew who is one inwardly, and real circumcision is a matter of the heart. It is spiritual and not literal. Such a person receives praise not from others, but from God. New Revised Standard. How true Jewish character is expressed from the heart. Quote, Paul's point is not that Gentiles are the real Jews or that the foreskinned are the true or real circumcision. Quite the opposite. The terms Jew and circumcision are reserved for Israelites. Real circumcision, Greek lacks real, it is spiritual and not literal, literally by spirit, made manifest in the way one lives, not by inscription, i.e., not merely by a cut made into the flesh. Thus, this verse could be translated. Rather, the deepest character of the Jew, even the purpose of circumcision, is about the spirit and the intentions of the heart at work through the way one lives who is so marked, not merely inscribed in flesh, as if a mark alone fully defined who one is. Unquote. While circumcision of the heart, Deuteronomy 10:16, 30 verse 6, also Ezekiel 36:26, is surely something which is universal, not only to Jewish, Greek, and Roman males, but also to females. To assert from Romans 2:28 and 29 that non-Jewish people can be quote-unquote spiritual Jews is to misapply the text. The purpose of Paul at this point in his letter was to actually issue some admonitions to various Jewish Messiah followers in Rome who may have looked at their circumcision status as one of superiority, pride, and false confidence. To the Apostle Paul, a true Jewish person was one who could receive praise from God and should rightly not take any accolades from mortals who may be prone to fawn over them for being Jewish and circumcised from birth, because Paul himself certainly did not. Philippians 3:5, as his status was based firmly in what the Messiah had accomplished for him. So we close with this. Romans 2:28 and 29 is not a text which directly concerns the question, are non-Jewish believers really a part of Israel, given the ancient audience of the epistle to the Romans? This is a question which more concerns the salvation historical narrative provided by the Apostle Paul in Romans chapters 9 through 11. Which we will discuss in detail at another time. The great agony he had for his fellow first century Jews who had rejected Yeshua the Messiah, and the place which the redeemed from the nations were to play in helping to see salvation brought to the Jewish people. Okay, so Romans 9, 10, and 11, the analogy of the olive tree, non-Jewish believers are wild branches grafted in, as well as they are to be moved with great agony for the salvation of the Jewish people, so that the mercy shown to you, they may be shown mercy. However, Romans 2, 28 and 29, when examined properly, does speak to a negative spiritual dynamic present where various Jewish people will seek recognition via their heritage and will not always represent the foundational ethics which their heritage should convey to the world at large. So, to conclude, Romans 2, 28 and 29 does not say that non-Jewish people can be spiritual Jews. Romans 2, 28 and 29 speaks to Jewish believers and how their ultimate identity as Jews is to be found in what? It's to be found in Yeshua. It's to be found in a circumcised heart. And unfortunately today, via the rise of replacement theology, you're going to see Romans 2, 28 and 29 misapplied more and more frequently. But simply because Romans 2, 28 and 29 does not say that non-Jewish believers in Israel's Messiah may be regarded as spiritual Jews, that does not mean that they are not, as we see later, Romans 11, the olive tree, that they're not wild branches grafted into the olive tree, which is Israel. It doesn't mean they're not part of the commonwealth of Israel, fellow citizens with the saints. And it doesn't mean that they do not get to participate in the restoration of the kingdom alongside of their Messianic Jewish brothers and sisters. So we're going to later in the week, I'm planning for us to discuss some of the statements in Romans 9. Not all of Israel are Israel. That's another passage which we have to sort through. Again, this has been taken from our ministry publication. Let me switch screens back. Are non-Jewish believers really a part of Israel? And indeed, in this day of a huge rise of supersessionism, huge rise of replacement theology, if you're a non-Jewish believer involved in the Messianic movement and you consider yourself a fellow citizen with the saints, part of the Commonwealth of Israel, and you might get a Messianic Jew once in a while say, well, I think you are adhering to replacement theology. You're trying to cancel out my identity, my distinction. You know, the best way to neutralize that is be an active co-laborer with them in the salvation of Israel and the Jewish people, involved in the Messianic mission, Jewish outreach, Jewish evangelism, standing with the state of Israel, standing against anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, and that will neutralize a lot of those claims. They should see you as you're coming alongside them, you're wanting to join with them in common cause and unity. And no, we're not all exactly the same, but we do have far more in common than not. Okay, and so once again, as I said, later this week, I do plan to address some of the issues from Romans 9. Not all Israel are of Israel. What does that mean? Because that's another one of these tricky passages which is getting people really upset and confused. All right, so that concludes our theology roundup. We do have some important news to go through. Of course, what are some of the ongoing hot spots? Israel in the Middle East. We're not going to talk so much about the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Events unfolding here at home, which are, of course, very concerning. We do see a lot of interesting history taking place. And it is our job as God's people, it is our job as believers to use wisdom and discernment to know how we should handle these things. Now, we always do the news roundup after the theology roundup because all of the news is time sensitive, so things change. All of the links I'm going to be going through, you'll be able to access these later today when this episode is archived at messianicapologetics.net. Okay, so our first story, and this picks up, I even mentioned this yesterday, just wasn't able to integrate it in. This involves some of the discussion, some little spat, which Ambassador Mike Huckabee, he's a former governor of Arkansas, he's now U.S. ambassador to Israel, had with the Israeli Ministry of the Interior. After meetings with the Minister of the Interior and with the help of the Israeli Prime Minister, I'm happy to report that the issue concerning visas for American evangelical organizations has been fully resolved. Okay, so you can read his official post in greater detail. You do need to be aware that I'm not saying this specifically of the Israeli Minister of the Interior, but there are extreme Orthodox factions in modern Israel who are hostile to Christians coming to Israel and Christians in Israel. And they're also very hostile to Messianic Jews in Israel. That by no means makes up all Israelis. But from time to time, they may have a little spat like this. You might see a little spat like this, and you have to just keep it in the wider picture. This has been resolved. Down the road, are we likely to see something else like this happen? Yes, but even among allies, even among friends, the United States and Israel, they will disagree from time to time. That doesn't mean that the Israeli-U.S. relationship is on the verge of collapsing. So keep it big picture, keep it in perspective. Yet, and from time to time, I have to remind some people of this. The state of Israel, while we believe it was founded according to end-time prophecy, Isaiah 66:8, it is not the restored Messianic kingdom. The state of Israel is a necessary installment toward the restored Messianic kingdom. You have to have an independent Jewish nation state in the Middle East in order for certain prophecies to take place. But it's not the Messianic kingdom. We're still awaiting the return of Yeshua. All right, from Charisma News. This is from yesterday, July the 21st, and their headline is, Syria, Israel, and Trump. Could we see peace in the Middle East? This just highlights how there are a lot of people who are speculating about what's going to happen in the Middle East now with the Iranian conflict, the 12-day war largely settling in, what the aftermath of that's going to be. Of course, now we have the situation in Syria with the Druze. Is that going to change? Is that not going to change? There are a lot of question marks here. The question being raised is, President Trump signed an executive order lifting sanctions on Syria. And I looked at something the other day that Trump wants to see peace, stability, and economic opportunity brought into the Middle East so the Middle East can be used as this middle ground area to compete possibly with the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. So some of you are familiar with the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, the Chinese wanting to establish various trade routes through Europe, South America, back into the Pacific. A competing trade route network would basically extend from India through the Middle East, so it would have to involve the Gulf states, it involve Israel, it would involve the Mediterranean, then go back to North America. So there's an economic element to the peace process. We don't know all the specific details. All we can do, of course, is speculate. And one of the things I have always asked people to politely keep in mind, while we have certain ideas regarding the end times and prophecy and Daniel chapter 9 and a peace agreement, and I'm not saying that they're all wrong or they're all bad. I mean, I'm a premillennialist. I still believe in a 7-year scenario of sorts, but there are always going to be other elements which we cannot predict, which can still see to the futuristic fulfillment of various prophecies, but are they going to be as compartmentalized as a lot of the dispensationalists of the 1960s, 70s, 80s, into the 90s, and into the turn of the millennium had it? So let's just keep that in mind, monitor situations. Yes, there are a lot of people who are speculating. There's nothing wrong with speculating, but we have to stay grounded, and we have to be willing to admit that there might be some elements which we haven't considered because we haven't encountered them yet in real time. All right, this is from People Magazine. This was the first announcement I saw across my feed. Malcolm Jamal Warner, who played son Theo on The Cosby Show, dies at 54 after drowning on a family trip. This is just really sad. I hadn't really followed Malcolm Jamal Warner's career that much, but of course, growing up in the 1980s and 1990s, like a lot of people, I watched The Cosby Show, and this is just a real tragedy. Our prayers go out to his family. And, when you see people who you grew up with in popular media and entertainment, and then they die like this, it's just really sad. This is just a tragedy. So definitely issue prayers for his family and for all of his fans. This is another post from Ambassador Mike Huckabee. Some of you have probably already seen this. Disgusting. 25 nations put pressure on Israel instead of savages of Hamas. Gaza suffers for one reason. Hamas rejects every proposal. Blaming Israel is irrational. Israel rejects 25 nation statement calling for end to Gaza war. Now, I definitely believe we should all be praying for a quick resolution to the Gaza conflict. And have mistakes been made by all parties? This is war, of course. But Hamas is the one which instigated October the 7th. Hamas has rejected all the different peace proposals, and Hamas is the main problem here, which has to be taken care of. And so far, the only way it's been able to be taken care of has been via the military action of the IDF. Okay, so speaking of replacement theology, supersessionism, this has been circulating on social media the past few days. This is from Joel Webon of Right Response Ministries. This has got a lot of, it's had a lot of blowback. God actually loves you way more than the dispensationalist wants you to believe. You are not a second-class child of God. And where is he getting this conclusion? Now, he's going after dispensationalists here who believe that God still is concerned with the ethnic descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? Today's Jewish people. And that God has a special purpose for the state of Israel in his salvation historical plans. So he's taking that and he's extrapolating this and claiming that a dispensationalist, now it could apply to others as well. You don't have to be a dispensationalist to believe that God is not finished with the ethnic descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He could be going at, he definitely would be going after today's Messianic Jewish people and those in the Messianic community here. But what he's basically saying is that if you believe that God is not finished with the Jewish people, that non-Jewish believers in Jesus are second class in the kingdom, and that God loves Jews, in particular Ashkenazi Jews, more than he loves you. And he's gotten a lot of pushback, and rightfully so. And Joel Webon is going into some very dangerous territory. While he has not yet denied that Ashkenazi Jews are real descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He has gotten dangerously close to some of this. And some of the people who he attracts entertain ideas that, well, maybe Hitler and the Nazi Party made some legitimate points. And of course, that would lead to, well, was there even a Holocaust? So this guy is very, very dangerous. When you get into the realm of, well, Ashkenazi Jews, they're really not Semites, they're just kind of imposters, then you start entertaining Holocaust denial, and you start entertaining maybe Hitler was right, at least on a few things. And the Jewish community has got way too much influence in the world per their size. So this guy's very, very important. Look, simply because we may believe that God is not finished with the ethnic descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, today's Jewish people, and that they have a unique destiny in God's salvation historical plan, per the Apostle Paul's own words in Romans 9, 10, and 11, doesn't mean that God loves some people more than the rest of everyone else. We quoted from Romans earlier today. Paul in Romans makes it clear, everyone, every human being is negatively impacted by the effects of sin. And without the salvation of Yeshua or Jesus, we are each eternally lost. But I would expect Joel Webon to have more to say, and not so great, about the matter of Israel and the Jewish people in the days to come. And we will definitely be monitoring that and keeping you up to speed. All right, this is the first announcement I saw on social media, but there have been others, from Instagram, the New York Post, yesterday. The Trump administration on Monday released a trove of documents related to the April 1968 assassination of civil rights icon Martin Luther King Jr. Today, after nearly 60 years of questions surrounding the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we're releasing 230,000 MLK assassination files. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard wrote on X. So, we know that one of the first things Donald Trump did after returning to the White House, signed an executive order to declassify the JFK, RFK, and MLK files. And it's going to take a long time for people to sort through this, and some of the conclusions people are going to draw will be debated, but the main question we should be concerned with is what's going to come after this. And of course, that's an open question right now, and we will have to wait and see. Let's change up things a little bit, shall we? This came across my Instagram feed yesterday. It's from the channel The Deep Astronomy. In 2008, humans sent a message to the planet, Guylies 581c. I hope I pronounced that properly. It will arrive in 2029. So, if there's life on the planet that can respond and does it, we would first hear back from them in 2050. Now, the younger someone is, and the more impacted they are from technology and especially science fiction, these are the kinds of things, we're going to send a message to this planet, and if someone's there, we expect a response back. These are the kinds of things which get even sincere believers asking the question of, are human beings the only sentient intelligence in the universe? And I can also guarantee you this, once humanity has a more permanent presence on the moon and on Mars, we got a lunar base, we got a Martian base, these are the kinds of questions which will increase in exponential detail, because it's not just going to be, we're here on Earth, we got our amateur telescope and we're looking at, and we're just wondering, I wonder if God's got other things going on. Instead, it's going to be, I'm in the lunar dirt here. I'm in the Martian soil here. And it just naturally stirs those questions. So I've mentioned in the past the growing field of exotheology or astrotheology. Are humans the only civilization or not? These are definitely questions which are live wire questions for a lot of people. And it's because of stuff like this. Okay, this is the official X post from Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard. Today, after nearly 60 years of questions surrounding the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, we are releasing 230,000 MLK assassination files. And there's a link to the National Archives there. Now here, you see here saying, thanks to President Donald Trump's leadership, Executive Order 14176 resulted in 3 unprecedented interagency efforts to identify, digitize, declassify, and release files related to the federal government's investigations into the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and Dr. King. And so the real question, of course, comes, what else is going to be released after this? Because, a lot of people, myself included, we got questions about, the assassination of these figures. Is the common narrative accurate or not? And what else do we need to be thinking about? So, and I'm not alone in that. I think everyone has a relative or two or the friend who, I'm really interested in the JFK assassination, or I'm really interested in, right. That's not something abnormal. From Open Source Intel, this is the joint statement from the foreign ministers of and all of these countries, calls for an immediate end to the war in Gaza. This is what Ambassador Huckabee was condemning. So you can read the statement here. From the X channel, Vivid. Protests against Israel. And here we see London, the Houses of Parliament, Big Ben, the bridge crossing the River Thames, filled with people protesting against Israel. Protests for Druze human rights. As we know, Israel recently took action to defend the Druze community in southern Syria. Nothing. And why is that? From Instagram, this came across my feed last night. I thought it was interesting. This is from Jordan S. Rubin. Jordan S. Rubin is diving into this hotly debated topic in our recent episode together. That is, should you eat pork? And he's approaching this from a health standpoint. Some of you are familiar with Jordan Rubin's materials. The harsh reality is that pork is the greatest carrier of parasites in the world, and yet many people eat it on a regular basis without giving it a second thought. Now, Jordan Rubin is of the position that the kosher dietary laws are things which bear significant health importance for God's people, not only in the past, but even in the present. Because even with the arrival of Jesus onto the scene, whether it's human physiology or animal physiology, those things have not changed. And he addresses, from his perspective, some of the issues involving Mark 7:19, which in most English Bibles reads as, thus he declared all foods clean. There's the classic debate in theology, should the Greek clause katherizon panta ta bromata, should it be rendered as thus he declared all foods clean? A statement of the author or editor of the Gospel of Mark, or does it continue the dialogue and should be translated as purging all the foods, speaking of bodily excretion? Now, within the Messianic community, as it concerns the dietary laws, and by the way, I want to mention our faith does not rise or fall on the kosher dietary laws. There was never a capital penalty associated with violation of the dietary laws. You just made yourself ceremonially unclean. Are there health factors for the dietary laws? Some of the Messianic community say yes. Others say no, to which I would have to add, every human body is different. Every human body, every person's makeup is going to respond differently to the ingestion of certain substances. Eating a piece of bacon is not going to kill you, but eating 2 or 3 strips of bacon over a lifetime, would that possibly kill you? To me, it's no different than if you smoke 1 cigarette, you're not going to get lung cancer. But if you smoke 2.5 packs a day, as both of my grandfathers did for almost 50 years, you might end up with lung cancer. You might end up with emphysema. Every person's body is different. Now, with that in mind, what came up on my Instagram feed just a few moments later was this. So I thought I would use this to highlight my point. From the channel Mech World. New study reveals having multiple cups of coffee per day is linked to 6.7 years slower brain aging and faster cognitive performance. A December 2024 study suggests that drinking more than 5 cups of coffee daily may reduce cognitive age by 6.7 years. Now, I don't see anything in here regarding how much coffee is considered to be a cup. But every person's body can react differently to drinking a substance like coffee. A lot of people don't like coffee. I remember when I was 9 years old and I was trying to impress adults like, hey, I'm going to be able to drink a cup of coffee. And yet I had to add like 6 or 7 tablespoons of sugar to make it passable. Now I tend to take my coffee 2 very large cups in the morning, black, just like my late father would drink it. And by the way, there is a reaction I have later to that coffee and me needing to flush myself. And that's all I'm going to say. A lot of people have that reaction. They have to go have a bowel movement after they drink coffee. Other people, they can't stand coffee. Other people, they drink coffee and then they have to urinate 4 or 5 times throughout the morning. Everyone's body is different. So whether it's eating or not eating meats, which are classified by the law of Moses as clean or unclean, whether it's drinking coffee, whether it's drinking soft drinks, whether they're made with cane sugar or corn syrup, everyone's body reacts differently, and only you know what's best for you. Okay. 4 more stories. This is from the X channel Hamza, who is a Gaza-born peace and human rights advocate. This I thought was interesting to just highlight how complicated the situation in Gaza is. He says, as much as I criticize the Israeli government for Gaza's humanitarian catastrophe, that by no means exempts Hamas from responsibility. In fact, as a Palestinian from Gaza, I hold Hamas even more accountable. They've looted aid, resold it on the black market at inflated prices to fund their militias, and terrorized civilians who tried to access it through beatings, torture, and even executions. Just recently, they executed Palestinians for cooperating with the American-Israeli Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, an organization that itself deserves serious criticism. And yesterday, they humiliated and tortured civilians, making them walk half naked under the sun, not even for working with GHF, but simply for trying to receive food from them. Hamas turned hunger into a weapon and survival into a crime. So here's at least one opinion from somebody that is Palestinian in Gaza, some kind of a peace activist, and he blames everyone for this problem. Okay? So I suppose blaming everyone for the problem is better than just blaming Israel exclusively from a Palestinian's perspective. From Open Source Intel, yesterday, July the 22nd. President Trump has decided to pull the United States out of UNESCO, citing the organization's emphasis on diversity, equality, and inclusion, as well as what he views as a consistent pro-Palestinian and pro-China bias. Back more on the American home front, the Epstein situation. This is from Newsmax today, the 22nd of July. Attorney General Pam Bondi's push for Jeffrey Epstein transparency took another significant step Tuesday in her announcement of a sit-down with Epstein's convicted facilitator, Ghislaine Maxwell. So, DOJ to talk to convicted Epstein facilitator Ghislaine Maxwell. Indeed, this is getting very, very interesting. What does Maxwell know about who Jeffrey Epstein was, his presumed client list, all these kinds of questions? If there was no client list, or there's nothing in these documents to incriminate a lot of people in government, industry, entertainment, sports, whatever it might be, why is she still in jail? So this is a situation which I know a lot of people have been following. There's not going to be a happy outcome for this in any way. It's not going to end up well. But yeah, we just have to wait and see what is going to transpire. And what I think is the more serious situation, and I got this right as I was finalizing the notes for today's show. Breaking: Trump declares that Obama is guilty of treason. And of course, this goes back to the whole Russiagate, Russian collusion, that whole investigation. This is something I think which is much more serious than Jeffrey Epstein, because it goes straight to the American presidency. And indeed, this is something which is not going to end well either. Now, what's going to come from this? We know that prophetically, for a lot of people who are premillennialists, they consider the United States to not be a direct or even indirect player in the end times. So presumably the American Republic, according to this perspective, is something which has faded out. And what would be the kind of situation you'd have to monitor to see the American Republic possibly fading out or being removed from the scene? This kind of thing, unfortunately. But we also know, because God's people are commanded to pray for their leaders, to pray for the stability and the success of their home countries, that we got to just pray that the truth comes out and that we can all handle it as well as we can. Ultimate truth, ultimate justice, ultimate peace only come from the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, not this, what we have. All right, so that concludes our news roundup. How hot is the summer going to be? I don't know. Do I have concerns? Yes. Should you have concerns? Yes. But we know that the work of the kingdom is something vital for us to be throwing ourselves into, being fully dedicated to, especially as things get more and more complicated. And we'll see what tomorrow brings, doubtlessly. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and donations toward all of our ministry efforts. You can give online at outreachisrael.net/support. We'll see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, shalom, and take care.